Hello Strength Matters, welcome to Whiteboard Wednesdays. I'm Phil McDougall
And I'm Scott Olson.
and today we're going to talk about the pull. When we're talking about pulling, we're talking about pulling on something using the upper body. Scott, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so let's talk about just everyday uses. This really comes up for all of us when we're lifting groceries, holding a child, pulling a door open. This is going to come up in really countless times a day, so that's not too uncommon for people to think about how pulling relates to the everyday life. But when we talk about pull in the context of exercises at the gym or advanced level performance, really it can be a very big conversation. So if we're to ask an average trainer, give us the briefest exercise routine for pulls, really we would come up with these basics. We have rows, we have pull-ups, we have lat pull-downs, and we have the deadlift. So these are all intentional movements that can be programmed in many different ways. But when Phil and I talk about a lot of the human movement patterns, we realize there's just higher level principles we can start applying to either any of the basic pulls or some of the more complex and advanced stuff out there. So Phil, do you want to take us through maybe the categories of how the body gets engaged with a pull?
Yeah, I think before going into that, it's worth just having a quick chat about what's happening with the actual hand itself. If I were to ask Scott to flex his pecs, he can do that quite consciously. Same, flex his glutes, flex his lats, flex his deltoids. If I said, Scott, flex your rotator cuff muscles and stabilize your shoulder, you're like, that happens naturally when a crushing grip is applied. And that happens to stabilize the shoulder when we're holding on to something for dear life or lifting up something really heavy, because it connects the arm to the rest of the body. So is the grip a crushing grip when we're pulling something, or is it more of an endurance grip where you're just using the ends of your fingers? So think carrying shopping a mile or two, you'll just be holding it like this, because these muscles, these can just hold on for ages. Like, it's a climber grip, it's a GS grip. So that's just one thing to bear in mind, is what's going on with a grip. If you're training for strength, then crushing grip, versus training for endurance, then claw grip or hook grip. So I think it's definitely worth considering what the rest of the body is doing when you come to pulls. So you've got everyday life pulls. You can say in the locomotion family, because pulling is such a small, you can't just say you're only using your arm to pull. A pull mixed with locomotion is, let's say, should we use the heavy door analogy?
Great. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a heavy door, whether it be a heavy door in front of us or a heavy trap door. Somebody might grab heavy door, lunge away and use their whole body to pull. Then that would be more of a locomotion pull, right?
Great. So we're naturally using the full body movement and even momentum as we engage our whole body mass away from this object we're pulling.
Yeah. And further down the continuum, you've got things like pulling a truck, locomotion pulling, moving on to the hinge. So a hinge, well, a deadlift is a hinge with a pull, right? There's not actually much arm action going on with a deadlift. All you're doing is just crushing grip with straight arms. The rest of the majority of the action is then lats and all the posterior chain. So just thinking about that trapdoor analogy again, you're either using one hand, in which case you've got the hinge and elements of anti-rotation. Take that to the gym and look at a bent over row, which is an isometric hinge with arm action. Moving on down, squat and pull. So you've got, let's say, using that heavy trap door again, then maybe trap bar squat.
Absolutely. And this concept that we approach problems differently. So, once we're outside of the classic gym exercise routine, There's a lot of ways to pull open that heavy door or lift that heavy object off the ground. Some of us will naturally go into a deeper squat and pull this object as close to our body as we can before we power up. So this is just, there are a lot of different ways we could be lifting a heavy object off the ground. And it's, as we go through this, if we think back to that heavy door analogy for a moment, these different ways are just addressing the puzzle. But they're different ways of engaging the body that as we practice them and apply them, it starts to, I think, level up any aspect of the classic pull exercises out there. But you also have push at the bottom of that movement pattern. So explain that.
Yeah, well, in some of the more advanced exercises and real life movements, you've got a push and a pull going on at the same time. So first thing that comes to my mind is the bench press. You've got a push and a pull going on. You've got a kettlebell military press. In order to get more force going upright, the skill is actually engaging the pulling muscles. So the same muscles that you would use to pull down, you're actually trying to keep engaged to pull up. Creates irradiation and more force going upwards. And just to go back to the anti-rotate and rotate and how that fits in with the whole heavy door analogy. And you see this in gyms a lot when people are doing kind of pulling exercises. A distinction needs to be made as to whether you are using the 3 rocks of rotation in the body that we talked about in rotation. Are you using the rotation available in your ankles, your hips and your thoracic spine to create that pulling action? And in doing so, then you are using the diagonal muscles of the glutes and the lats. Or are you standing perfectly still and making it an anti-rotation pull? So is it thereby really stimulating everything in the core area? So I think, should we finish it, tie it up by saying...
Well, let's talk about that heavy door. If we had 100 people approaching heavy door and they were all on film, we would start to see these different strategies come out in their body as they're naturally using their own strengths and habits to create, to succeed with a heavy pull. And Phil even mentioned this hook grip, this grip of efficiency that shows up if we're carrying sacks of groceries over a long distance. If we saw someone pull not just one heavy door but 20 heavy doors, we would start to see a different adaptation where they're going to use the most efficient grip, the most efficient stance, this full body movement, so that they could succeed with the next one and the next one and the next one. So there's so many different ways to approach a pull, but when you start to play with these different concepts, you realize you can intentionally pull them into your own activity and just really level up your power production, your strength, maybe even your endurance or efficiency if that's your goal.
Yeah.
So I know Phil's working on the materials for the blog, so you're going to see a lot of these examples broken down in a clean continuum. Anything else you want to add?
So, for instance, when it comes to reading the blog, so in the blog there'll be an entire continuum associated to each one of these movement patterns. We've split down all the movement patterns because we're saying that anybody, any of your clients, any of your friends, family can sit and can go straight into one of these movement patterns at some point on the continuum. When it comes to the pull continuum, you have to first figure out which it's pull and what, because it's very rarely just pull on its own. Pull and anti-rotation, for instance, would be that. So I'm thinking my grandmother, to get her doing pull and anti-rotation, I would basically just have her stand in front of a door and pulling on a band, versus a step and a lunge with a pull. So anyway, in the blog you'll find the whole continuum for each of these pulls, and somebody will fit somewhere on them, working towards the more advanced. If that made sense.
Brilliant. Wow.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode.